Hello, good evening, everybody. This is Dr. G.K. Kapoor, former professor, IMI, New Delhi. I have been into teaching of business laws for more than 50 years. I have been recording a series of talks on contract law in India. In the video relating to breach of contract and the remedies, part 1, we had talked about two remedies which are available to a promisee in case of breach of contract. And these include a right of rescission, that is, right to terminate the contract. And the other one that we talked about was claim for damages. In our discussion on claim for damages, we had talked about the provisions of Section 73, which essentially talks about the payment of compensation in terms of the difference between the market price and the contract price. We also noted that no loss for any remote loss or any, no compensation for any remote loss or any consequential loss shall be available, except where the exceptional circumstances which might result in a particular loss called special damages were in the contemplation of the parties at the time of making of the contract. Now, Section 74 talks about prefixed damages. And in today's lecture, we are starting with the discussion on prefixed damages. A lot number of times, the contract stipulates the amount of compensation that shall be payable in the event of the breach. Such amount is called as prefixed damages and may well take the form of either liquidated damages or penalty. Now, what is the difference between liquidated damages and penalty? Let me show you the slide here. So both, of course, are prefixed, but liquidated damages are referred to the amount which represents a reasonable estimate of the likely loss. So where parties calculate, they perceive that in the event of the breach of contract, what are going to be the damages caused to the party, and accordingly, they make a mention of the same. It is called liquidated damages. But on the other hand, if the amount has been arbitrarily, fixed, no reasonable estimate of the likely loss having been made, the objective is not essentially to compensate, but to serve as a deterrent for the breach of the contract. So in India, we do not, however, make difference between liquidated damages and penalty. Whether the amount of compensation payable has been fixed as a reasonable or the likely estimate of the possible loss or has been arbitrarily fixed. What is payable is the lesser of the two. That is the amount of penalty that has been so fixed, or the amount of prefixed damages, or the amount of actual loss. So that is whichever is less shall be payable. So supposing if the amount of damages prefixed is 1 lakh of rupees, but the actual loss is only rupees 50,000. So what shall be payable will be 50,000 only, and not the amount stipulated in the contract, that is rupees 1 lakh. But if the actual loss happens to be 1,50,000, the amount that shall be payable shall be limited to 1 lakh of rupees only. So in India, we really do not make any distinction between liquidated damages and penalty. But in UK and in international contracts, whereas liquidated damages are upheld as valid and payable, penalty is void. So nothing will be payable where the amount prefixed as by way of penalty in case of a transaction entered into, say, for instance, in London, England, or UK. So let us take some examples of the liquidated damages or penalty for that matter. Or let's see that which kind of stipulation will amount to liquidated damages and which one will be a penalty. A very common stipulation in contracts is stipulation for interest. That supposing if it is a transaction for a loan, and if the loan installment is not paid on time, then there will be a stipulation for payment of a penal interest besides the EMI. A penal interest will be payable for the default, for delay in the payment. But how this stipulation is worded is very important. I'm narrating my personal experience to you. It was way back in 1973 that I built my house. So for building my house, I raised a loan from a government institution, Delhi administration. The rate of interest was 6% per annum, but there was a penalty clause that in the event of default in payment of any installment, the rate of interest will stand increased to 9% from the date of the advance. That is from the date of the loan. Now, in any case, this stipulation cannot be upheld as liquidated damages and shall certainly be a penalty. So what shall be payable in India? Because as I said, in India, we do not make any difference between liquidated damages and penalty. So what shall be payable is the lesser of the two, the amount prefixed as damages and the amount of actual loss. So raising the interest to 9% from the date of the loan cannot in any circumstance be the possible loss to the lender for default of any installment. Therefore, what shall be claimable will actually be the loss for the period the installment has been delayed. Supposing the installment has been delayed by 1 month, then say a reasonable interest, say at 2% per annum, in addition to that 6% may be charged as a compensation for 1 month only. That is the period of default. I had the occasion to carry out extension of my house in 1987. This time I raised the loan from HDFC Limited. Now they had a reasonable clause. The penalty clause was there, but it stipulated only additional 2% interest for the period of delay. Any court will uphold it as a valid clause and it shall be payable. Now, compound interest, where the contract stipulates payment of interest at a compound rate. So should this be stipulated as penalty? The answer shall be that if the rate of interest payable was to be compounded is stated in the agreement itself, then the courts have held it not to be a case of penalty and the interest will have to be paid at the compound rate. Now, one more interesting, situation may be in terms of the earnest money or the security deposit, and the same is liable to be forfeited if the party backs out. Here, the courts have held that if that security deposit is supposed to be adjusted against the total money payable. Say, for instance, it's very common to keep a security deposit, or sometimes also called as earnest money, in case of immovable property deals. Now, whatever amount is kept as the security deposit or the earnest money, though it is stipulated is liable to be forfeited if the party backs out. But at the same time, if the party does not back out, the same amount is to be adjusted against the total price payable. Courts have held that this cannot be upheld as a penalty because that security deposit is adjustable against the total price payable. But where that earnest money, say many a time in case of government contracts, so where the government invites tenders, etc., it also asks for earnest money, which is liable to be forfeited. And this earnest money is not adjustable against the total price of the contract or total amount of the contract. Now, here the courts have held it to be in the form of a penalty, and what shall be forfeited will not be the amount actually given as the earnest money, but the amount of earnest money or the amount of actual loss to the party, whichever is less. So similarly, many educational institutions at the time of admission, now they actually mention it in the prospectus that the first installment of the fee is to be for the first quarter, and but for a very small amount, the rest of the money shall be forfeited if the student does not take the admission. Now here, let me once again tell you, this is in the form of a penalty, and what can actually be forfeited is the amount of deposit made, that is the fee paid for the first quarter, or the amount of the actual loss, whichever is less. Now, supposing the institution had prepared a waiting list and the next person is offered the seat who takes the admission, then the loss will only be with respect to the administrative costs in handling, in cancellation, and admitting the new student. Nothing beyond that can be forfeited. But if the waiting list is also exhausted, there is no waiting list anymore, and the seat goes vacant, then the amount of deposit can well be forfeited. So that's about liquidated damages and penalty. Then another remedy which is available in case of breach of contract is suit for specific performance. Prior to the Specific Relief Amendment Act of 2018, specific performance was ordered only in very rare circumstances. Payment of damages was the default remedy, which was awarded by the courts. But the whole scenario in India has changed with the passing of the Specific Relief Amendment Act 2018. And specific performance is no longer the discretion of the courts. Rather, it has been made as the default remedy. So the amended Section 14 of the Specific Relief Act now recognizes only 4 categories of contracts that cannot be specifically enforced. Otherwise, all other contracts will be specifically enforced. So if a person has sold, say for instance, a building and later on refuses to give the delivery of the same or possession of the same, one can file a suit for claiming the possession, and the court will be under obligation to award it, except, as I said, in the following 4 situations where the specific performance will not be ordered. These include a contract where a party has obtained substituted performance under Section 20. So if in place of, say, that particular building, if the party has accepted the delivery of another building owned by the same owner, then naturally one cannot later on insist upon the possession of the building which was the subject matter of the contract earlier. So where party has accepted a substituted performance, or say for instance, where X had taken a loan of rupees 50 lakhs from Y, and X is unable to pay, but at the same time, X has to receive, say, 50 lakhs of rupees from Z. And now Y agrees that it's okay, that let Z pay me that 50 lakhs of rupees. So he has accepted this substituted performance. He cannot. Now, if Z fails to pay, Y will have remedies only against Z and not against X. Then second exception or second situation where specific performance will not be awarded is a contract involving performance of a continuous duty which cannot be supervised by the courts. It will happen, say, for instance, in a case where the subject matter of the contract is construction of a multi-storied building. And after one story has been completed, the contractor backs out. Court in such a case will never order specific performance, in spite of the insistence by the party that he is one of the best contractors and should be ordered to complete the building. The court will only order damages because court cannot supervise the construction till all the 5 stories are completed. Third one is a contract which is so dependent on the personal qualifications of the parties. So if supposing Sunidhi Chauhan is engaged for a performance for a night, and all the tickets having been sold, it's all house full, and on the last moment Sunidhi Chauhan refuses to perform. No court can order Sunidhi Chauhan to go and perform. The only remedy available shall be claim for compensation of the loss occasioned to the organizers. And lastly is contract of a determinable nature. Determinable contracts are the contracts that can be terminated at the will of one of the parties without conveying any reason. So if the nature of the contract is such and one of the parties has expressed his desire to terminate the transaction, the court cannot order specific performance. Now, under this 2018 Amendment Act of the Specific Relief Act, now the time period has been specified within which the suit for specific performance should be disposed also. And the period specified is 12 months from the date of service of summons on the defendant. And this period can, however, be further extended by another period, but not more than 6 months. The extension can naturally be granted by the court only. This Amendment Act makes a specific amendment to the suit for injunction, the right with respect to injunction, that is the stay order. Now, in some situations, the stay order has now been barred by a law. So courts have been debarred from granting an injunction in a suit relating to an infrastructure project contract, where such injunction is likely to cause delay in the completion of such projects. Now, prior to this amendment, Now, say for instance, laying of the metro line, certain properties had to be acquired for which there existed a special authorization under the law, but people used to move the court and obtain a stay order. And therefore, the project used to be delayed by a number of years at times because courts took a lot of time in deciding the particular case. Besides that, in case of infrastructure projects, the Specific Relief Amendment Act 2018 stipulates designation of special courts to try matters so that the decisions can be given at the earliest possible without any delay. Now, the last right that we are discussing that shall be available in case of breach of contract is the suit on quantum merit basis. Quantum merit means as much as earned. Quantum merit is a Latin expression, and in simple English, it means as much as earned. So the quantity merited. Basic rule of law, however, is that one cannot claim performance on the part of the other unless he completes his obligation. However, there are a few exceptions. That is, where one will be allowed to claim as much as one has actually done. One might not have completed the job, but for the partial completion also one can be compensated. So the situations are, number one, when one party abandons or refuses to perform. So where one party has on its own abandoned the transaction. It so happened that a person had entered into a contract with a publishing company for the publishing company was bringing out a magazine. So an agreement had been signed that he will deliver a story in 5 installments, for which, let's say, rupees 5,000 was payable. After 3 installments were published, the publication of the magazine was abandoned. Now he claimed for 3 episodes that had already been published. But the publisher refused. The court said that it was no fault of the party. The party was prepared to deliver the next 2 installments also. So the publication having been stopped, the publishing company was held liable to pay proportionately, say 3,000 rupees for the 3 installments that had been published. Second situation will be when a contract is divisible. So quantum merit basis is relevant where the contract is indivisible. But where contract is divisible in 2 parts, so for whichever part has been executed, the payment must be made. And lastly, when indivisible contract is completely performed, but badly performed. So in such a situation, say for instance, you engage a painter and he has painted your building. It had been agreed that a certain amount shall be payable after he completes the painting work. as per the contracted specifications. You do not like the work and you say it has been badly done. And maybe you will have to scrape the whole and get the entire thing redone. So you have rather been put to a loss. But the court will say that no, you must pay to the contractor the amount settled minus the amount that will be required to bring the work up to the contracted level. Now, in case the court admits that the job done is so bad that it cannot be corrected and it will have to be redone, then in that case, maybe nothing will be payable to the contractor. And even maybe contractor may be held liable to compensate the other party for the loss. But more often than not, it will be the amount which is contracted minus the amount that shall be required to be spent to bring the work up to the contracted standard. So that's all in this particular video. Thank you very much for giving me your patient hearing, and we shall take up a new area next time. Thank you very much once again.